I did want to say, to get started with, and I will start asking with, first of all, what you guys are in the industry, you know what's happening every day, just to kind of give us an idea of what you see the current situation being and what you see the future being. And it's to the panel, who wants to start. Whoever has a perspective, please feel free to. Or we can start at this end and go down.
The future of the apparel industry continues to be very bright because for the time being, everybody is going to be wearing clothes. But one thing is for sure, it has changed dramatically over the years, and it's going to be different tomorrow and the day after that. The best advice that I can give your students is, I know that many of them are here for the merchandising or design functions. Everybody wants to be that in the industry, but there are so many more opportunities for employment that transcend those two categories, that don't leave out the possibility of being involved in some of the other areas, specifically on the supply side, because whether it be the fabric or the fabrications or the trimmings, those are going to be used every day. And trying to track this industry, it's a global industry today, and one of the faculty was talking about educating the students on the fashion trends and the fashion centers around the world. They're also the manufacturing centers. And where the fashion centers tend to remain the same, the areas that these garments are being produced, it's not going to be the same place that's being produced today. There'll be other developing countries. The smart people keep their eye on Steve's company, and they're so far ahead of everybody else in the sourcing function that it's difficult to catch up. But I would say this is a terrific industry. It's one of the oldest industries that we have, and if you look technologically, it's still made with a needle and a thread and an awful lot of handwork, and there's an opportunity there for you someplace. Learn all you can learn about textiles, and all you can learn about fibers and fabrics and garment assembly. Not to become an expert in any of those, but to have a working knowledge, because no matter what I've described, knowledge of those things are going to be very important. Thank you.
I think that there's some trends that have already emerged, and they're going to continue to emerge. One of them is fast fashion. It's being able to get product to the marketplace quickly, not having the length of a season that we're normally used to. One of the prime examples of that is Zara. They turn merchandise over quickly in each of their stores. If you don't buy it the day you're there, it won't be there again when you come back 2 days, 3 days later, so they're teaching you as a consumer how to shop. The other thing is that continuous caravan of trying to find low labor. It continues to swing through Asia, and it's swinging its way toward Africa. There's some emerging countries, Ethiopia at this point in time is emerging as a country producing for U.S. branded apparel manufacturers, European branded apparel manufacturers. This is going to be a constant trend. Will it continue to make its circle all the way back to North America and to Europe? I don't know. We can see if it will. Maybe it'll be niche businesses. You continue to hear the terminology reshoring coming back to the United States. Right now, those are niche businesses. They're small productions. They're not large, but it's extremely, for us as a supplier, it gives us great pride to be able to support those businesses that are trying to continue to grow here in the U.S. I think Caribbean, Central America will continue to be important. It may ebb and flow, but it's still going to be important as far as supplying to the U.S. market. And if there's one piece of advice I can give everybody who's entering into the industry, keep your passport updated.
Yeah, there really is a fundamental disconnect there between the concept of fast fashion and low-cost manufacturing overseas. Because many of the areas where the labor cost is low, well, it's low because the infrastructure in the country isn't there. You don't have the shipping, you don't have the port capacity, you don't have the sophistication. But you know what? The people in the low-cost labor countries, they're just as bright as you guys are. They may not have the benefit of formal education. Bangladesh, I think it's like 2 years worth of formal education for many of the sewing operators in the plants over there. But I have seen garments coming out of factories in Bangladesh that are higher quality than anything I ever saw produced in the United States. So the needle skills can be taught to a willing workforce. And you also have to recognize that in many of the developing world countries, the slice of the working population that is going into the cut and sew industry is a much higher cut across society than what we've had in the United States in recent years.
And in many cases, the women there know how to sew. They sew at home, the way it used to be done in this country.
What you do see as a result of U.S. trade policies has really been the development of the textile industry overseas in countries where it never really existed. After NAFTA passed many, many years ago, I mean, y'all, it was long before most of you were born that NAFTA got started with Canada. It was the Canadian-American Free Trade Agreement, and then later Mexico was brought in. The industry guys pointed out to me that there really wasn't a textile industry in Mexico until NAFTA, until the local population, the local entrepreneurs were incentivized to build textile plants down there. So the textile plants went in, the cut and sew plants went in there, and everybody in the industry said, just wait and see what happens as the rest of the world opens up. And what happened is the plants came out of Mexico faster than they went into Mexico. So it's a very fluid, dynamic situation.
I've been doing this for a lot longer than I probably want to admit. And I actually grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at a time when most of the men's manufacturing for suits was being done in Baltimore, New York, Philadelphia, and those areas. And there was this giant sucking sound where it all came to the South. Everything came down to the non-unionized, non-minimum wage South. And they stole all of our jobs and brought them down here. So by the time I got here, they were all going to Mexico and Central America. And then by the time we closed those up and went to China and Vietnam, and now we're back into China and India. Rule of thumb was, we're in the apparel industry, so we're always the first people in, and we're always the first people out. Okay, you go in, you build up the workforce, typically with low labor products, t-shirts, those types of things. By the time you get around to making men's suits, they're usually pretty well up the scale. By then, though, wages start to go up. So wages go up, so you look for that next place. Well, that's great, except you start running out of places. And to Paul's point, Africa is certainly an opportunity for everybody to take a look at. And that cycle just gets faster and faster. When I was young, 100 years ago, that cycle was probably 20 years. That you moved into a country by the time you got out of there. When we went into Mexico, probably was about 15. We were in China, it was about 10. When I went to Vietnam, I thought it'd be 5, that we would be out looking for something else. Now, yes, we're still in Vietnam. We're in India, we're looking at other places to go. Because what's going to happen with Vietnam is it's a good place to be, so guess what? Everybody goes there. And now with the passage of TPP, is that going to increase that or not? Everybody, if you're going to go, you're already there. If you're waiting for TPP, you're waiting too long. So the factories are going to fill up. They had a 12.5% minimum wage increase this current year, and they had 12% last year. You see some devaluation with the strength of the US dollar. So that helps offset some of that. Well, but they're no different than you or I. I've been in factories around the world, managed factories here in the US, and the operator sitting at the machine in my factory in Alabama is no different than that lady that's sitting in a machine in Vietnam. They're just trying to make life better for their family. So they're going to work, and they're working 48 hours a week minimum, probably 60 with overtime, to make life better for their families. But then there's also, they want social benefits to come along with that. They want pay increases, just like we wanted here. Unfortunately, when that happens, you have to decide, am I going to stay there, pay for that hopefully better quality, quicker turn, or am I going to go to another low-cost country, start all over again, and let it build up? But you're running out of infrastructure in a lot of those other places. So.
One of the things that both Arthur and Paul alluded to that I see in my industry, I kind of wear two hats because I sell sewing thread to local factories here in the United States, but I'm also responsible for making sure that if a designer, for instance, a Donna Karan or Saint Laurent or whoever is using Gutermann thread, whether they're making it in France, the US, Vietnam, Cambodia, wherever, that they use the same product that they specified on the billing of materials. And that in itself, I call myself the thread police sometimes because it's a challenge. But one of the things that nobody has really talked about that I see as a huge opportunity in the fashion-related field is the computer end of the business, the graphic design, the software programming. It's all a part of the fast fashion that Paul talked about. But I mean, these designers are coming up with a design, and before it even goes onto a piece of paper, it's in the computer, it's shot out to every factory. They're already making the prototype in a muslin or whatever. And the good thing is that they all need sewing thread. So when I speak to students, which I do a lot, they all look at me like, you make a living selling thread, but it is the thing that holds the garment together. And the better the quality, the better the garment. So I sell to all aspects. I sell to the highest level designers, and I sell to the fast fashion that spits it out as fast as it comes off of their machines. But it's all still basic sewing skills, technical skills, textiles, you know, whatever aspect of this business, it all gets down to running it through a machine.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your hospitality today. It was really, really good, wandering around. You know, seeing students with smiles on their faces, I think they look very happy doing what they're doing. But, you know, from my perspective, I'm older than Steve, but younger than Arthur.
Everybody.
I don't want to dwell on this too much, but you know what we have seen up here on the front table is obviously we're a lot older than you guys. So what's happened in the time that we've been in the industry, whether it's menswear, women's wear, fashion, you know, technical applications, because there's a lot of sourced technical products that are from other countries. We've seen a extremely significant decline in our capacity in terms of being able to produce garments. When I came here, there would be factories like Steve's saying that would be producing 20,000 a day menswear, up to 40,000, and that's in the area that Steve was talking. And what would happen is that they would provide all the services for the branded labels, which at the time would be like JCPenney, Sears, so on and so forth. So now if you fast forward to where we're at now, if you look at the branded labels, there's no factories that are supporting them. It's all offshore. So net result of that is it's great for you guys. You look as though you have a great program here from the grassroots up. You know, nuts and bolts. And it gives you a lot better opportunities than when I started in the industry years and years ago, let's call it. So you can go in as a designer, a pattern maker, computers, production quality, and you can end up in a major capital area like Atlanta maybe, or probably New York, Montreal, big garment centers. LA is another big garment center. Or you can be part of Ralph Lauren working in Shanghai or Delhi, where they have wall-to-wall people looking after one thing. That's the production of quality garments to the store that sell, and there's no overage. So it's a real big opportunity. You know, I'm proud of being part of the clothing industry over the years, but I think you guys have really, really significant opportunities from now through the future.
And one of the areas that I constantly get called where they're looking for people is in the pattern making and the CAD area. I mean, right now, I can tell you of 6 jobs in the Boston area that can't be filled. They've been trying for over 2 years to fill these jobs, and they're right in Boston. They're essentially work for life because they work for the US government. These are people who historically would have built patterns. Nowadays, they're expected to both build patterns as well as shepherd new items through development. Not production, but really through development, which is a long process for the US military. I have no ability to recommend anybody. There's no university track out now that produces those kinds of people.
I can speak to that, actually. I was waiting for when the right time was.
We only have Rick to join in.
For myself, I'm a technical designer for Hardwood Clothes, and we make tailored menswear garments. And for me, I was one of those people who could fill that gap. Because I understood CAD systems like Gerber, Electra, and I was able to understand construction of garment, as well as to be able to work with people. So, you know, it's this kind of situation now for me where they're trying to create a role for me because I can kind of step in and do a lot of different things that they didn't have someone doing in a particular role before. And just with the changes that are happening in the industry, you kind of have to learn to accommodate for those things. So when they were saying earlier about, you know, just not looking at just being a designer or, you know, these other things, there's so many other jobs that are available, but you just have to explore to kind of find those jobs. And for me, I kind of stumbled into it, where I found something where I got to make the patterns I wanted to make, and I wasn't behind just a computer desk making patterns, but I got to be on the production floor, walking a garment through and seeing it from start to finish. Whether it be from conception to, you know, the final product, or just experimenting 5 to 10 samples, like she mentioned earlier, until we got that product right. So, I mean, there's jobs out there that are beyond just a designer. Not to take away from being a designer, because that's a great job to have, but there are other things out there that need, you know, someone to fill that position. And like you said, you are in a great position where you're learning all aspects of the business, so it doesn't confine you to just one role. I think that's what I appreciate most about the program, what I've seen of it today, is that you're learning all of these different things so that when you do get into a job, you can kind of fill gaps and they can create roles for you, and which is kind of what happened with me. So that's definitely a plus for this program.
One thing I would say for Latasha, which I hope it's okay to touch on it. You know, we have an international organization of clothing designers, and it's menswear, and maybe they'll expand their bailiwick sometime to include all design and manufacturing and so on and so forth. But Latasha was a young professional with the organization. She got to travel to Germany and a number of other places, right? And these are with the top people of their skill set. Hugo Boss, so on and so forth, too many names to mention. And you know, where she is now is the result of her application, her hard work, her determination, and her skill. Right? Can I go on? But it's an ideal example of, you know, people that you have here, and maybe we can help with, you know, some of the manufacturing and the supply chain, to try and get people into this kind of situation. Personally, I'm very happy that she's here and been very, very successful. And as a young lady, she only has a lot further to go.
Just to piggyback off what you just said, though, too, one of the things that I wanted to encourage people today, students specifically, is that a lot of, you know, being a student, it was difficult, especially in going to a school that was in the Southeast, to kind of find where I could work. Because I wasn't the person who wanted to move to New York. I wasn't the person who wanted to move to LA. I wanted to stay within the South. So for me, it was really just taking some risk and asking people, because there's tons of people who are willing to help you, but you've got to ask. And so I really would encourage you, if you see something, like I kind of fell into this because I started off just helping someone learn how to do what I was doing. There's a member of the organization, his name is Brian Howard, and I basically started off, after I graduated from school, I had a professor send me an email and say, hey, I've got this designer who wants to learn how to use Illustrator and Adobe, Illustrator and Photoshop, excuse me. And so, can you teach them? And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a great opportunity. I could make a couple of dollars, you know, meeting with them once a week to teach them how to use this program. And so that's what I did. And it wasn't necessarily me being a designer or whatever it was that I thought I wanted to do or what I could be doing, but it was just me taking a risk and saying, okay, you know, it was a lot of humility involved, really. But that's what it was. And so, you know, after I worked with him on that project, more opportunities became available. He introduced me to Michael and other members, and it just became this cycle of, you know, growing and really working for what I wanted. And you appreciate that much more than, you know, if it was just handed off to you. So I would definitely encourage you to ask people, ask for, you know, talk to your professors, get to know what they know, and just really just give it your 100%. Like, don't take no for an answer. Don't, like, you just have to push yourself. And yeah, and then it will happen for you.
What questions do you guys have? We could sit up here and talk for days. I've talked to most of these guys, it's not that interesting. So what questions do you guys have?
So Steve, it is very soothing to hear about like reshoring and how the manufacturing are coming back, and there are also evidence that things are coming back, and we have a lot of like, you know, age in terms of automations, and Chris also mentioned about like those kind of innovation center. But on the downside, like we hear about like Clemson Apparel Research Center, it's already phased out. So how do you know, respond to those kind of things? Because, you know, on one side you think about like innovation center, and on the other side you're phasing out of those things. So
Right, and you're right. You see a lot of the universities phasing out of manufacturing support. Some of it is kind of passive, where your older faculty members who typically had industrial experience, they're retired. They were replaced with really good young faculty members, frequently had the much better academic credentials than the people that they replaced, but not the manufacturing location. So at one hand, we're looking for having more flexibility, more innovation, more technical textiles. When I hear Jeff talk about his conductive textiles and all, it immediately starts me thinking about projects I've done over the years. How do you maintain your circuit integrity across a juncture at the shoulder, for instance? What are you going to do to be able to get an easy juncture across there that you can take into manufacturing? So I see the technical expertise disappearing out of the faculty side, and I don't see it being replaced.
I also think there's a growing loss, to your point, Chris, a growing loss of people who are responsible for designing garments who never get into a factory, who are working in front of a computer, and if that was the case, we'd be walking around with two-dimensional garments. So it's when the business was here in the United States, and you can send your people either by car or a short trip to a factory, and they would train there. Not only would they learn how the garment is constructed, they'd learn the components that go into the construction, they'd learn what the process step by step is. So when they came back and they were working on designing, they took into account the fact that it could look great on paper, but it's got to look great on a hanger, and even better on the person buying it. So that's a loss as well. And I don't know how you overcome that unless you, like I said before, having a valid passport. You're going to travel all over the world to those factories, and hopefully you work for some organization that allows you the time to spend to master your craft, to understand the dynamics of it.
I think the reshoring feeling is, it's promising, it's hopeful, but in the reality of this business, with it being a labor-intensive business, unless you're talking about the type of non-fashion garment like underwear or t-shirts that can be highly automated, unless it's a niche type application, you have to be realistic. I don't see the industry ever coming back in the manufacturing side the way that it once was, or even close. We still have the military uniforms made here, but that's because by law they have to be produced here. Another point that I wanted to make is one of the tremendous changes that we've seen since I got in the business, most of the people got in the business. It used to be fairly simple. You had manufacturers or contractors that made the garments. And then you had retailers of all different types and sizes that sold the garments. And what we've seen take place has been amazing. It didn't happen at once, it's happened slowly. But today we have retailers that are basically manufacturers, having garments made to their specifications around the world. We have manufacturers who have become retailers in bricks and mortar and in online things. If I were to ask Steve, who really is the only manufacturer up here, what is one of the more exciting parts of Lanier's business? I tell you what I would think, that today they're in a retail segment that is probably generating as much profit for the companies as the vast manufacturing did. Tommy Bahama being a name that you've probably heard of. It's not volume, but it's a very interesting concept. And I know that there are others as well. But you have to look at the potential marketplace in apparel and where it's coming from. It's completely different than it used to be. And this has created opportunities and it's created roadblocks for people that were traditionally in this business. Last point I want to make is in talk about what might be some questions that you know, students might be interested in. And one of them was, you know, where would we go to look for a job when we graduate? And as Paul or somebody else mentioned, if you're waiting until you graduate to start that type of search and making those type of contacts and networking, because while you're there, while you're talking to somebody, and this could be at a Starbucks, it could be somebody you went to school with, it could be anybody. You ask them, well, somebody going into your business, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn at school? So my point is, if you're waiting till the year you graduate, you're starting way too late. There are people that I knew and grew up in this industry, and they told me from the first time I met them, they knew exactly what their career path was going to be and exactly where they wanted to be. Very few of those people made it, because the important thing is to be in a position where you can take in what you're, and make a strategic move based upon what you're learning. I will never forget somebody you know, but I won't bring his name up. 35 years ago, we were having a drink, and he said, Arthur, what do you want to be? And I said, I don't know. I said, Dave, what do you want to be? And he said, I want to be the president of this damn company. And he never did reach that level. My answer to him was, I just want to be happy in my work. And there's a lot to be said for that. In your pursuit of something to do, choose something that you enjoy and that you like, because you're going to be spending a lot of time doing it. But the key thing is, make those contacts now. Introduce yourself, because you never know where the next opportunity is coming from.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. That network is going to be critical. The other thing is, it seems really funny when you think about how many people work in this industry and suppliers. It's really the biggest small town in the world. I did a sabbatical leave back in the early 90s in Hong Kong, and the shock to me was it was a huge small town. Everybody in the industry over there, and textiles and apparel was the industry there. Their families had gone to school together. They knew each other for generations. They knew when people had made a mistake. And they lived with it for the rest of their lives. And that's the way this industry is. You'll run into the same people for the rest of your career, or as long as you stay in this industry. So that reputation that you develop is critical. On a personal note, I have a daughter who's 31 years old. She was a Japanese language major at Pitt. Lived in Japan on a couple of different occasions, exchange student, junior year abroad, all of those kinds of things. She's lived overseas. She loves the fashion and the art end of the industry. And about 4 years ago, she decided she wanted to be a stylist or a creative director in New York City. Now, of course, she didn't bother to tell her parents how long the career path is to do this, which is generally, you're not gonna make enough money to support yourself for at least 10 years, by the way. The kid is on her way, however, finally, she's got a couple of publications in Interview Magazine now that are coming out, finally, so she's just as happy as she can be. She can walk in on the commercial side of any of the couture brands and walk out with any merchandise she wants for a shoot, because she's now developed a good enough reputation. As her mother, I'm shocked at the thought that she's got a couple of $1 million worth of jewels and clothing sitting in her apartment. Right. And no insurance, no liability insurance or anything like that. It's a really diverse industry, and it's through her, I've seen a side of it that I never knew anything about. I never knew that those magazines that you can go down to the bookstore and buy, they didn't pay for those shoots that are in there. The photographers paid for those shoots. Everybody donated everything because they wanted the publicity, and somewhere down in the future there is this reward, which is being able to make a career out of it. I mean, y'all are probably already seeing some of the unpaid internships that you're expected to do, or even some of the internships where you're expected to pay to be able to do the internship. So think about it. It's not the world that I graduated into at all, or that most of us graduated into for that matter, because most of us went into more of the manufacturing side.
Well, and I remember when I came out of the home sewing industry and came into the production end of the business, and I would go into factories or contractors in New York, and everybody, the man who sat behind the desk who ran the company always said, I grew up at my father's knee, you know, tailoring, and I don't want my kids doing it. And that is so opposite of my perception of the industry today because of all the things that we've seen here today. The historical, I don't think the young woman that did the historical area, just the whole movie industry. I work with a customer out in LA who, there's a business that makes all the costumes for Hollywood, and you walk into their building and they have sets all over the place. And this guy started out as, you know, he was sewing costumes in his basement of his apartment in, you know, some little town outside of LA. And he now owns a multi-million-dollar company that provides costumes for the industry. They don't have to be the best quality workmanship. They don't have to be tailored properly. As long as they look good on the camera, you know, you don't see what's back here, the photography session. You don't see all the hooks and pins and things like that that are put on. But that person has to have the skills to develop that business. I think about at Biltmore, they just had this costume exhibit of Downton Abbey. And oh my God, I mean, people in that area of the state, they employed, I don't know, 75 people during this exhibit who were just fans of this TV show to talk about these costumes. And you know, so it's an industry that reaches out, and that person that still sews by hand, a very good friend of mine runs the alterations facility in the US for Neiman Marcus. And at one point she called me and she said, Kathy, I am desperate for some tailors. She said, our starting salary in our alterations workroom is $60,000 a year. She said they got to know what they're doing, and they're working on garments that cost millions of dollars, so they have to be skilled. It's all about the needle and the thread, you know. So I think it's fabulous to think about all the different realms that are available, and your students don't think about that. They think about being Marc Jacobs or whoever. You know, they want to be the person that creates and puts their name on something. And in Chris's world, in some of the more technical fields, I don't even know the people's names. I don't even know half of the words that you all use. But it's all the same. There's different levels of, and you can be successful at the very base level or at the very top. So keep encouraging them.
It's not your grandfather's business. My mother said to me, I don't want you to go into the men's clothing business. 2 years after leaving school, guess where I ended up? And she was very thrilled about it. But, you know, in all seriousness, if you get a theme from this table, is that you have to go out there and you have to sell yourself. You have to be persistent to get to a point of where you need to be. You need to develop skills over a broad spectrum from the different you know, skills that you're going to need to get to where you want to go. And then you got to figure out, what do I want to do? And believe me, it's not your grandfather's clothing business.
What one skill set would you guys each like to see students coming out of a university program like this have when they come to you ready for work? What one skill set would each of you guys like to see?
You want to start down? You want to start down, we'll move on.
You know,
It's a little tricky.
well, I think,
We do
perfectly
such
honest with
different
you,
things.
what I'm looking for is somebody that's inquisitive
Okay.
and luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Okay? I heard that a long time ago. And I was one of those guys that started at my father's knee, okay? My grandfather's a tailor, came over in 1902, just about when Arthur was born. And I think they went to high school together or something, I'm not really sure.
You open the door.
I love it. And my dad was a tailor, and he said, look, learn a trade. You never make a lot of money, but you'll always be able to eat. Okay? So he was right. I learned a trade, and my kids always ate. We always ate. But what I'm doing today, yes, I can use everything I learned as growing up as a tailor and having a tailor shop and what I do today. But what I do today is vastly different than what I did before. Was I lucky? Yeah, sure. Was I in the right spot at the right time? Yeah, sure. But if I wasn't prepared when that opportunity came along, if I wasn't willing to reach out beyond my comfort zone, which was I sit and sew all day, I wouldn't do what I'm doing. So when I look to hire people, I look to hire somebody that ultimately is going to replace me, and that in order to do that, they're going to not just do, that's my job, that's all I do. They're going to have to do what their job is, and well, what do you do over here? And what do you do over here? And let me learn a little bit more about what you do. And that's what's going to make that person valuable to our organization long term.
But things have changed in the industry so much over the years. I mean, when I first started, everything was wools and you knew how they draped. Now everything's man-made fabric, poly viscose, and it's just a different industry. It used to be all hands-on. You'd go in, they based everything by hand. It's now an engineered garment. I mean, when it comes off the path, it comes off the CAD system, it better be right and ready to be sewed. I mean, there shouldn't be any hiccups in the line. It should fly through the line and come out looking nice when it's done. We've engineered all the fullness and the spring of the garment right into the pattern. There's no hand basting and holding things anymore like there used to be. Very little die cutting done anymore like there used to be. It's just a totally different industry. I'm looking for somebody who, like Steve said, is work ready, willing to learn, willing to get their hands dirty and learn the little things that make the garment come together. I mean, anybody can make a pair of pants. No, seriously. But there's so much more to a garment. You know, I mean, the things you don't see, all the things that go into it, behind the scenes. You know. Well, I would say somebody who's got problem-solving skills, somebody who can use their mind to the same dexterity they might be able to use their hands. Because I don't care what you're doing, you're going to be confronted with problems of all different types. And at the same point in time, somebody who's got a degree of confidence based on knowledge, in this case, of textiles, textile manufacturing, fibers, and garment construction. And somebody who has salesmanship, because one way or the other, initially you're selling yourself or you're selling your idea, and you have to believe in that to really make a good job of it. But regardless of what you do along the way, whether it's selling trimming items or selling fabric or selling lining or selling a new concept or a new design feature, it helps to be able to sell. And that's something you probably can learn along the way. But somebody who has the ability to do that probably has that ability before he comes here to school. And you try to find somebody like that. My son, as we were encouraging him many years ago to pursue something, I kind of perceived he was lackadaisical and he had no drive, and until I overheard him on the phone talking with some people about something that he very badly wanted to do. And now he never became the go-getter I hoped he would. But having said that, finding somebody who doesn't run away from a problem and has the ability to think it through.
I don't think it's unique to our industry, but I look for someone who can communicate. If you can't get your point across, if you can't work as a member of a team or a group, if you can't take direction, some people are more skilled at verbal communication, some people are more skilled at written communication, but it's so critical to be able to start somewhere and to grow somewhere. So I think that, that's what I look for if I'm looking for someone.
Okay.
I'll just tell a funny, quick story.
Okay.
After I graduated from fashion design school, I lived in Fort Lauderdale, so I went back home because it was the gas crisis. I couldn't afford to drive to New York, and I couldn't, go out to LA so I ended up with going to Miami to what basically is now the swimwear industry. And I was very confident in my own abilities, but I couldn't get that across to other people. And I walked into this interview at a swimwear company, and there was a man sitting behind a desk that I promise you was this big around, and he had a big cigar in his mouth. And he gave me a pad, and he said, and a piece of muslin, and he said, I want you to draw me a bathing suit and stitch it together. And I burst into tears and walked out. I mean, it terrified me. And I thought, I got out to my car and I could have done it, but I didn't have the confidence at that point because I didn't feel like I was good enough to show this man what I could do. I actually went back to see him after I got into the profession and told him that story. And he laughed because he said, all I wanted you to do is show me what you could do. And I think it's confidence, I think it's open-mindedness, I think it's communication skills, I think it's everything that you're trying to teach these kids, but it has to be put into a package. They've gotta feel like they know where they're going or where they wanna go and how to get there.
Me? For me, it's pretty easy. I didn't go to a school this big. Unfortunately, we had student dropout, whether that was full-time students or part-time students. And I'm proud that I was a part-time student, and I worked and went to what they used to call night school, 3 nights a week. And the decrease in the students was primarily based on liking what they were doing. First of all, you got to like what you do. You have to have the drive to get better at what you do. Be creative. Liking clothing comes into it in a big way. And I was fortunate enough to come to the U.S. of America many years ago, and my company that I came here with at the time offered me some significant opportunities. Paul and I worked together in Philadelphia for a number of years and for the same company for quite a few years.
Yeah, what?
And this is what, being in the business, it's an emotional business. You need to like it. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to put the hours into it to get something out of it. So I've met a lot of people along the path, and it's very, very unique, I would say, to the clothing business in general, or the fashion business. You meet all these great people. And Latasha's only just started out. And that's why we're so happy. But like what you do, get better at what you do, have career goals, and be part of the team.
Thank you. I wrote down stuff and they took it all. No, but I wrote down definitely somebody that's curious as to how things work, why things are being done the way they're done. That's a big one at where I work right now. Like, why have we been doing it like this since 1880? Tell me why. How can we fix this? It's not working. But definitely like a solutionary leader, somebody who's looking at things and they're saying, okay, what can I do to fix this? What can I do to make this better? But also with that comes a willingness to understand the history behind things. I think that, you know, when you're first coming out of school, you have this desire to change, and impact, and you don't really take in what's being presented in front of you. And I think that when you have a student who's willing to take the time to really get an understanding of things and then transition into making change, it makes a difference. It's received better, especially from, you know, your peers and the people that are above you. And then just someone who is just able to communicate, able to deal with people, particularly. I'm in a unique situation where I can go from the design area out onto the production floor, and I get to work with the operators. I get to see, you know, what they're doing, how they're doing it, what works, what doesn't work, you know, and I get to talk to them and say, okay, we can make this better. We can make this job easier for you. And you have to have somebody who has that kind of compassion to be able to make those changes and those decisions. I think for me, ethics plays a lot into working, and I think that you have to have someone who has that conviction, I guess, to consider people and what they're doing and how you can make them, you know, make their job easy and make it better for them. Because like you said, you know, with this business, it's a very people-oriented business. You run into the same people over and over and over again. And you have to love people. You have to be able to communicate and deal with people. So,
Thank you.
And I'm going to beat on the same themes, because what I want is somebody who has a continuing passion to learn. You know, kids spend a lot of time basically figuring out how to put things over on their parents.
Yes.
You know, where they do kind of the minimum thing because they're not really passionate about it. And you suddenly realize at some point you have to grow up and be an adult. And you may as well do the things that you're passionate about, and you better keep learning along the way. I know one of my biggest disappointments was I had a student I taught when I was a young faculty member. He was really good, excellent in manufacturing. Well, about 15 years later, I had a company that was looking for somebody just like I remember this student. And I said, go talk to him. I know the company he's working for they're going to go under, he's going to be available on the market, and he'd be great for you. He was the biggest dud. You can't imagine how bad a dud he was, because he'd stopped learning. All he knew was what he had learned in college and the little bit that he had learned when he went to the first company. And that's the problem, quite frankly, I struggled with as a faculty member. You've got a company that comes to you and they want somebody who knows the innovative side of the business because they're entrepreneurial and they need somebody technical who's going to augment that. And you realize as you go down your list of people that you know and you say, you know, this person's really great in cotton textiles, they're really great in polycotton fabrics, they're really good in clothes, but this is a medical textiles job, and you say, I don't have anybody because these guys quit learning along the way. And it's a recognition that what your students know is actually much, much broader than a garment-based industry, not a fashion garment-based industry at any rate. The medical textiles area, the technical textiles area, they're huge.
Well, we're about out of time, but I'm going to ask one last question because I really want to know the answer to this. You guys have talked about reshoring and technology, but what about 3D printing in the apparel industry? What do you guys, have you heard anything about it? What do you think?
Can I give you the bottom line on that one? Okay, there's a big 3D printer company in South Carolina, 3D Systems. They've printed something like 138 different substrates, including chocolate. 3D print chocolate, okay? What nobody seems to have figured out how to do, however, is orient the polymers going through the print heads. Until we can do that, until you can get those same kind of fundamental material properties that we can get by orienting the polymers through drawing after extrusion and all, I see a very limited application of apparel for things that we're actually going to wear.
As a 3D garment.
I have a question to the youngest panelist. Ooh. So, based on, I don't know, based on conversation, everyone in this panel likes teaching, right? So you just like communicate to students and like teaching. At the same time, now I feel we have lack of communication between academia and industry. What do you think do you see value in the creation of industrial advisory board that helps to establish this relationship? And could you invest one day in year to come to meet student and faculty and discuss the current need? Because we are missing here a lot of our undergrads. They would love to listen to this conversation, and we have lack of this communication. Each of one is its own pot. We are boiling, cooking, but we have miscommunication. So how industry is willing to re-establish this, because it was before in older generation. I think older generation faculty, they know there was a lot of communication between academia and industry. Now we somehow missing that. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's kind of how I was brought into the organization. Actually, is they put together, the ISCDE put together a group of new talent from throughout the world, and we worked on projects to basically come up with solutions for how we could create this type of mentorship program for industry vets, I like to call them, and the newcomers. And one of the things that's been difficult for here in the U.S. compared to some of the other countries and what they're doing is that already I feel like when you come from academics, there is this disconnect, whether it's, I guess, going to school in the Southeast, there's this disconnect because you think you have to go somewhere else to pursue. So you don't really look at the resources you have around you. And so when you graduate, you immediately leave and you go off somewhere else. And so for that next set of people coming in, they don't have anybody they can reach out to because everybody's moved to the next place. So I think like groups like the ISCDE, the Southern Chapter, they're here. We just need to create this source of communication between us so that we can create mentorship programs, do workshops, and teach you skills that we learn in the industry versus what you're learning in school. And, kind of meet you in the middle of, what's being taught and what needs to be taught. I know just for me personally, graduating from Southern Poly, I had a horrible visualization of what the industry was really like. It was so superficial. Like when I really got into it and was working in it, was like, okay, this is not what I thought I signed up for. But it was a good thing. It became a good thing, and I really want to put things in place for that. And I think that's why we're here today, is because we want to put those things in place. It's just a matter of us being able to communicate, and so we can do that. Yeah.
Okay, great. I didn't know.
If I could add something to what Natasha's saying, is that if you look at the traditional textile industry, it's suffered a great decline. Now, you and I were talking about this at lunch. If you look up the road a few miles, you have Greenville, which had the impact of BMW.
Yeah.
And it is not the Greenville that I know when I first came down here. And every man and his dog that builds an auto globally is coming here or Mexico to build units. And there's a supply chain for that industry. We participate in the supply chain. We have found, my company, we have found a difficulty getting people to come and work for us. Doesn't matter what age it is, to come and work for us. We've found an even further difficulty to get younger people to come in a dirty, non-woven facility. Paul's nodding his head here. but we pay well, we have good benefits, it's not the business that it used to be. So we started up a high school program, and we started up a internship program, an apprentice program, so that we can draw on the local high schools. We have them in, we have the parents in, and we, at the college level, we have you guys in. And our success rate has been actually fairly good. I mean, you know, again, our pay is good, our benefits are good, is what all kids look at, isn't it? So, you know, maybe this is something from, you know, from the side of the table that you guys are at, when you're looking at high school, you know, how do you put this together? One of the intentions of Southern Chapter, and Steve might want to pick up on this because he's the lead guy on this, is we want to go out and build these relationships so that we can develop our membership. As you can see, we're all older people. And we have a history in the industry. You know, we have a lot of pride in what we do. And
I think one of the reasons why we reached out, obviously Greg and I have known each other for a lot of years, and having come out here with my past relationship with Dr. Sharma and Charles Gilbert before that, I think we saw a unique opportunity for our group to work in partnership with you guys here, because I think we bring a unique perspective to the industry. We're in somewhat of a unique industry in men's tailored clothing, but it's not something that we need to just stay within. I think there's an opportunity for our organization to branch out. When we talk about designers, that encompasses a lot of people, and we tended to narrow that focus for a while. Well, now here's an opportunity to partner up with your university and say, okay, there's a lot of folks up here that have a lot of knowledge. We'd be happy to share it with you guys, but there's also the opportunity for us to learn from you. What we saw today was absolutely mind-boggling. I can't pronounce half of the words that you guys said, not let alone understand them, okay? But I know it's important, okay? And when you start talking about sustainability and global sourcing, plus all the research you're doing, it's quite remarkable. And they're all the things that we need within our industry. So I think there's a unique opportunity. One of the reasons why we wanted to be here today was to sort of explore that opportunity for a partnership between our organization and yours, to see what can we do to benefit each other going forward.
Doesn't
We'll
even
flip
term
your
to be
question
certain
on the other
industry
side.
sustainability and con-
No.
How do we get your students involved with us? Because that's been one of the problems that I always saw as a faculty member. I used to teach a lot of senior level courses where I had the industry connections to be able to get the students into the manufacturing plants, the design areas and such. And I'm not gonna tell you how many different iterations I went, rearranging schedules to try to get a big block of time so we could all go take a field trip. And the class, some of the senior level classes were basically, this week we're in this manufacturing plant, next week we're in another one. The companies were more than generous with their time at top level people as well as floor level people to work with us. And the problem was getting the students to participate. Part of what I realized that I was up against was the fact that students' perceptions of what kind of desirable course times there were had changed. They wanted the classes that were taught in the evenings because once class was over, they were done for the day. So my old model where, you know, you finish a lab at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, well, if I'm up in Mount Holly, North Carolina, at A&E's production facility, and we're not going to be able to get back until 6:30, hey, there's no big deal. I take everybody out to dinner on the way back. No, students had 6 o'clock classes, they had 7 o'clock classes. Can't miss anybody else's class. So then you kind of mash things around in your head and you say, well, there is this thing called spring break, there's times at the ends of the semesters. We just block all the field trips together and we do a big, massive field trip at that particular point. No. Students had something else. Forget ever trying to do anything on Saturday, right? I don't care if it's a home football game or not. Try to schedule something with students on a Saturday. It wouldn't work. So I guess I'm asking you, what's the solution? How do we get the students sufficiently passionate while they're students that they're willing to spend their time?
I mean, it's obvious, you know, I can just look on all 4 walls.
So like come
there.
down to a Saturday meeting that we have in Atlanta.
I mean, if you look on the walls, there's some passion on the walls, right?
Yeah.
You have mannequins in here, there's passion, you're draping, you're making garments. You know, so there has to be a way to kind of tap into that. It's, you know,
Well, I mean, it's, the point's, you know, we set up field trips and then everybody has other things to do. It's a
Right.
big issue. I mean, in my personal opinion, I think as much individual type of contact we can have, if we get individuals associated with you guys and it starts to build up a little steam and we can build it that way. Word of mouth always seems to be the best way of getting things going.
You know, maybe I'll just add some creativity, and I don't have the answer either, because I know the same thing. I'm working with the students to get them to the Georgia General Assembly for our day at the Capitol, to get the students that are in classes related to policy. And we're having a lot of them drop out, and it's 2 days away from now, and I'm working all the lunches and the buses. So I really feel your pain. But on the flip side, you know, the technology is a way to build a relationship perhaps first. And we're exploring through Vicki Dorsey and the use of the Alumni Association. And the word alumni isn't a requirement. You don't have to be alumni, but you're a connection. And that we have our students connected, and we did an evening, late in the day event, which was all facilitated online, one-on-one conversations. And maybe we have to do a few of those first, get a relationship, and then go. Who knows? But the opportunities to consider how to connect your deep knowledge, your opportunities with our students. We're so glad you're here. This is really monumental. Thank you. Thank you all. And there are opportunities, there's challenges in higher education, as you can imagine. The pressures on faculty and what we determine as faculty success. But our College of Family and Consumer Sciences has a history, and I believe will continue to have a strong future. It's the applied, it's the career ready, it's the global kinds of opportunities, and you represent all those. So how to connect the student dreams, and they don't even know what the opportunities are, and how to connect our parents. Because when you said, a few of you, it's like, you know, don't do what I'm doing. Someone mentioned their dad said don't go into, and you did it anyway, right? So we have some parents that look at some of our career fields, and they want to know, is this really going to be the right decision? And so I think we have the opportunity, because we've been showcasing industry connection, a really strong pathway, and get students connected with all of you. So
I think we can learn too. I mean, I rode down with Chris and we were laughing in the car because I said, we're the right brain and the left brain. You know, I work in this creative world where, you know, designers do all this frou-frou stuff and sell their garments for, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars. And she works in the world of technology, and I actually call on some of these medical industries. I was speaking at lunchtime with one of the girls about a biomedical company that I'm working with that first contacted me about a thread that would hold up under some of their restrictions. They make prosthetics, and they're working with a lot of people, and they're having problems with chafing on the limbs where the prosthetic comes in. And I've learned more from them than I keep sending them samples because I want to keep learning them. Because it's a fascinating world of, they're looking for a thread that we can make, and Germany does it, but it's not widely distributed because it's so channeled. And I had to sit down and read and learn about, you know, all the aspects of this new world, because half the people don't even know what the difference is in thread. So it's, you know, I'm very open to, you know, coming over and talking to the students and talking about what I do, but I wanna see some sharing, and if that means some of the students coming over and doing a presentation for us in one of our meetings, I think there's great opportunity.
I'll take students to North Carolina,
That'd be cool.
Deepa. I'll go. I'll come up.
Can I add something? I guess I'm the only student.
Student left. Yes, you are.
Sitting here. Did you skip class?
No,
No, I don't have class on Tuesdays, but I'm gonna go to work because this was interesting to me. And I think a lot of it maybe could also be that the manufacturing aspect or the more technical aspect is not as pretty for students to go and look. But to me, stuff like local sourcing and supply chain, that's interesting to me, even though I'm in the merchandising track. But I kind of do, I'm one of those type of people that wants to learn about everything and then sees how the end product kind of comes from so much. But I think one of the biggest things of you being here, or maybe possibly coming back for undergrad, is seeing that there's so much that connects the end result, or the pretty aspect, or the glamorous aspect of what is fashion and what is merchandising.
Right.
And so I think these panels and learning from all of you is definitely very helpful.
You might have noticed we're not shy. So it's certainly, this is a good starting point for us, I think, and we're going to take feedback from you. When and how can we be most effective to help? I think all of us have given presentations during the course of our career, so we're comfortable doing that. So if that's something that's going to be a benefit, fine. If coming to visit us at one of our meetings in Atlanta is fine. I mean, I think we've opened the door to some future communications that can help both us and you. Us to get good quality young people into our industry, and you to find out where the opportunities are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.